Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Marshall, CEO of the U.S. Alcohol Policy Alliance, and welcome to another episode of The Shift, the podcast where we shift the national narrative around alcohol. October is National Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and all month long we've been talking about something too few people know, the link between alcohol and breast cancer. In each episode, we are providing facts and stories that highlight the reality about this relationship. We want to provide this information not to shame or blame women, but instead to empower them to make informed decisions. And the link between alcohol and breast cancer is finally starting to get more attention in the media. But one journalist was ahead of the curve. Back in 2018, Mother Jones reporter Stephanie Mencimer published a groundbreaking piece titled, "Did Drinking Give Me Breast Cancer?" So in today's episode, we talk with Stephanie about her cancer diagnosis and her reporting journey, and what she uncovered about the deception from big alcohol over the years. I found her reporting both informative and alarming, and I trust you will too. Stephanie Mencimer from Mother Jones Magazine, welcome to The Shift. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And I want to jump right into it, but recognizing that we're here to talk about your reporting on your article while you're going through breast cancer. Can you just start us off with sharing a little bit about your breast cancer diagnosis and what treatment you undertook to deal with it?
Sure. So this happened in 2017, and I was diagnosed with invasive lobular cancer. I was stage 2. Lobular cancer is a little different from most people. Most breast cancer usually is ductal, but lobular is a little different in that it's kind of spidery and it spreads out. It doesn't, like my cancer didn't even show up on a mammogram until like they knew it was there, but you couldn't see it. So it was a little tricky that way. So by the time anyone realized I had it, I had a 3-centimeter tumor. Fortunately, slow growing, and I did not have to do anything too radical. I didn't have chemo. I had radiation treatment and a lumpectomy. And so 8 years out now, knock on wood, I'm doing fine.
Yeah.
I did take the drugs, tamoxifen, which is the sort of standard treatment for this type of cancer, and all is well, as far as I know.
That's fantastic. And it's really interesting to me that as part of when you were diagnosed, you started doing your reporting, you started doing your investigation on this issue and ultimately wrote your article. Your focus was on how did you develop your cancer at such a young age compared to sort of the average age. Tell us what you discovered in your research.
Sure. Well, I think everyone, when they get sick or anything, your first instinct is to start Googling. So that's what I did. And also being a journalist, I was just trying to figure out, what I had, what the future looked like. But also, and I think everyone who has a cancer diagnosis wonders, like, why me? And there really is no good answer most of the time to that question, but there are obviously risk factors. And I think at the time, the National Cancer Institute had a little thing you could plug in your data, like how old you were and some various things, and it would tell you like what your risk factor was for getting cancer, breast cancer. And at the time, I think it had a question about how much alcohol you drank, which I was surprised to find there because I never had heard that drinking alcohol was a risk factor for any kind of cancer, really, much less breast cancer. And so I started thinking about it, and I started doing a little more research, and I was like, oh my God, I had no idea. Like, no one ever talks about this, but the World Health Organization had found that had designated alcohol as a carcinogen back in the late 80s.
Right.
And
Schedule 1. Yep.
yeah, and it wasn't really so specific at that point about what kind of cancer, but they knew it was a carcinogen for sure.
And do you mind me asking, what was your drinking like in advance of your diagnosis?
I never drank a lot. I had children at home, like my kids were like 9 and 11 or something at the time. So, at least I didn't drink very much with my kids around. Most of the drinking I had done in my life was like in high school and, early college or early 20s. And then my life changed and, I just didn't have the time or the inclination to drink as much as I did back then. So I drank a little wine on the weekends and that was about it.
So Like you wouldn't consider yourself a heavy drinker at any point in your life.
No. I mean, I think during high school, I definitely binge drank like a lot of
Right,
kids. And,
right.
where I grew up, that was kind of a thing. And it was the 80s. Like, that's what people did back then.
That's what kids were told to do in many ways, like in movies. Like, yeah. Uh, at any point in your cancer journey, did doctors talk to you about alcohol, or did you have to ask them about it? You referenced how you went into this without ever even knowing it was a carcinogen, but did your doctor start engaging you or having conversations about this with you?
Never, not once. And I actually got sent to see for a while, I guess the hospital I was treated at had a nutritionist that was assigned to the cancer section. And so they sent me to see her, and she went over all this stuff. It was this, like, whole grid of all the ways I should be eating, like five servings of broccoli and cruciferous vegetables every week and 25 grams of fiber. It was all really specific and also really onerous. Not once did they mention alcohol in that conversation. And it was pretty striking. I mean, it was striking later because it wasn't like this was that sort of, I think, happened before I fully realized, what I know now about alcohol. But when I looked back, I was like, they never mentioned alcohol. Nobody said anything about this.
Yeah, my husband had his hip replaced last year, and we had to go to a workshop on how the body heals and what to do in your recovery. And they said, don't eat sweets and don't do this. They never once mentioned alcohol, like anybody's use of alcohol. It's just, it's so frustrating.
I know I had doctors, I've had more than one doctor tell me to stop putting cream in my coffee. Like somehow that's going to be the end of me, is the cream in my coffee.
Yeah. So a few years before you wrote your article, Angelina Jolie very bravely, but also very publicly revealed that she underwent a prophylactic double mastectomy because she carried the BRCA gene that causes breast cancer. Some 5 years later, you are doing your research and you discovered that actually more women are at risk of dying from alcohol-related breast cancer than by a mutation from the BRCA gene, which just kind of blows me away. How shocking was that to you? What and when you revealed it, did you get a lot of either blowback or feedback, or people, in sort of incredulous at that?
Well, I think overall, when I wrote that story, no one wanted to hear that alcohol would give you breast cancer. I got a lot of nasty messages saying, that's just not true, you're making this up, and being in Mother Jones, I got a lot of people saying, what about like all the chemicals in the environment and microplastics or whatever, like 10,000 other things they say could explain this. And it was like people really like drinking and they really don't want to hear that it's that bad for you, because I think everybody knows on a certain level that alcohol is bad for you. I mean, it can give
Right,
you cirrhosis. You could die in a single day from drinking too much of it. Like
right.
there's and people know that on one level, but somehow they think if you just have it like in kind of small doses that it's fine, and maybe even it's good for you. And so people really didn't most of the response I got for a while was like, oh, this can't be true.
And was it from women, and women who had breast cancer, or was it from guys who didn't want to see, or people that didn't have women who didn't have breast cancer? Do you have a
I,
sense of that?
yeah, I think it was mostly women. Actually, the women who'd had breast cancer, a couple of them are like, oh, this makes a lot of sense to me. Like,
Right.
that was my one vice or whatever. Like they sort of acknowledged that could be an issue. Um, and but I think a lot of women just really, it's a hard, as it was for me, it was like the thing that was terrible about finding out about it when you're 47 is like you've lived your whole life not knowing this, and so you didn't have a choice. Like, it's, you have choices you can make about your health, and you can decide whether you want to drink or not, but it's like smoking. You should know what it's going to do to you and then you
Yep.
decide. But I think people were kind of angry that they didn't know, and it was unfortunate.
Well, we talked in our first episode of the podcast about sort of the science of it all. Um, but to that point, how you were 47 years old before you knew, what did you learn in your reporting about the alcohol industry's involvement here, and how and why it is that we don't have more public information about this?
Well, I learned that the industry had spent a lot of money researching the health benefits of alcohol. Like they had skewed a lot of the research, I think, to sort of promote this idea that like red wine could be good for your heart, and they had spent a lot of money marketing that sort of viewpoint. And they also muddy the water a lot. Like they put money into research, but it was for things like I don't know, like drinking and driving, like how to get people out of their cars. It wasn't to get them to stop drinking, it was to get them to stop driving. It was that sort of approach to
Right.
alcohol
Personal
prevention.
responsibility.
Right.
Um, yeah, I mean they promote that across the board, but you just referenced it, but let's call it out here or call it out here. Did your reporting find that there are health benefits to consuming alcohol?
There are none. Alcohol is a potent neurotoxin, and researchers have known that for 40 years. And there was really once the data became there were some really smart researchers who took a closer look at the way that the data had been shaped to show that alcohol is good for you. And once they were able to kind of clear out the noise, it
Right.
just there's just no benefit to drinking. None.
Um, so let's talk a little bit also what you learned in your reporting. We know that the alcohol industry targets women in their marketing, particularly in recent years. Women traditionally drank less than men, and that's changing. And binge drinking is going up amongst women much faster than amongst men. Um, uh, but they engage in what we call pinkwashing, right? Even wrapping alcohol bottles in pink ribbons and donating proceeds to breast cancer. Um, Share with us a little bit about the ads, particularly the Cheryl Crow ad that you referenced in your article, and what it had on conveying the harms or the lack of conveyance of information about the harms.
But a lot of the pink ribbon is an easy sell on things.
Right.
And one of the things, like the advertising and the sponsorship was a big part of it. Like the alcohol industry, threw some small tiny fraction of their profits into marketing like wine, as for breast cancer awareness week and stuff. But what really got me was that a lot of times you'd find like local breast cancer awareness groups or nonprofits or even cancer centers, like there's one here in DC at Georgetown, and they get free booze for their fundraisers and they serve it at their fundraisers. And that was one of the things that kind of shocked me. Like these people should know that this is an issue, but I think either they didn't know, or there were a few that were starting to change and be like, we really shouldn't probably be serving alcohol at our anti-cancer events. But I don't, I still get invited to them once in a while, and they'll be like, we're having a wine and cheese fundraiser to fight breast cancer.
Kylie Minogue, who famously announced she had breast cancer, 10 years ago, she has her own wine label now. Um, it's it's that disconnect. I mean, I don't like. There's nothing intentional on her part about it. It's just a lack of knowledge and exploitation by the alcohol industry. Um, so you talked about how, as a parent, you hadn't been drinking much in recent years. Did your both your reporting and your personal experience change how you drink, and did it change the people in your life around you? Did was this a educational experience for them that permanently changed their behavior relative to drinking alcohol? What impact did all of this have?
Actually, I was surprised at how many people told me, and still do once in a while. I'll bump into someone and be like, I read your article and I've mostly quit drinking, or I've really cut back. And I went cold turkey for a while, and then I sort of fell off the wagon. But I think I probably am much more conscious of being careful that I don't drink, in any kind of excess, and I try to stay within the government guidelines. And but a lot of people told me, because I think what I learned when I was writing the story is that no one really knows what moderate drinking is. Like, you can't define that. If you ask people,
Right.
everyone is a moderate drinker. Even
Right.
if they like you're drinking a bottle of wine a day, like that's moderate. So it was helpful for people to learn like what is, like, if you're going to risk it, like what could be your lowest level of risk. And so I think that that was eye-opening for a lot of people because I had friends who were like, I have 2 or 3 glasses of wine like every day with dinner, and I was like, oh, that's not moderate drinking.
Right.
And so some of them cut back quite a bit.
Well, thank you. The article's "Did Drinking Give Me Breast Cancer" is the title of this groundbreaking piece you wrote for Mother Jones back in 2018. Very little has changed since then from my perspective. We'll drop a link to the video in the description below. It's a really fascinating read, and I encourage everyone to read it. Um, my last question to you is, what should we all be doing relative to, in hindsight now or 7 years later? Uh, um, what do you think needs to happen in order to raise understanding of the link between breast cancer and alcohol, raise understanding between cancer and alcohol, and to your point earlier about the many other adverse aspects to it? Um, what are the next steps here from your perspective as a journalist?
Well, it's funny. I think even since I wrote that story, a lot of the kind of controls on alcohol have rolled back.
Right.
COVID really did a number on, there are a lot of bars in my neighborhood, and during COVID, they started serving like takeout cocktails, which would have been illegal, 10 years ago. And now, it's all gone out the window. And there's never a public health role in those decision making. It's all from the businesses. And, I think that it would be helpful if the public health sector picked up this issue as much as they do with other things. Like, we talk about a lot about drugs, but rarely about alcohol because it's such a part of like economic development, and no one pushes back on it that way. And, I think, and this is something I thought about after you asked me some of these questions, that, you know, we don't really know all the things that cause cancer. And as
Right.
the people who complain to me, like, oh, it could be this, it could be that, it could be pesticides or whatever. But we do know that alcohol is a carcinogen. And we have some control over it. Like
Right.
you can choose not to drink. You might not be able to choose how your air quality or all of those things. And so I think if we approached it like that, that like you have a choice and you should be informed, like that's probably the place to start. But since you don't know, like personally, I don't know that alcohol gave me cancer. I don't. I
Right.
have no way of knowing that. There are nine
Right.
other things that also could be there. And so, but on a population level, as you probably know, like we do know that it causes cancer and it will affect X number of people. And I don't think, with our public health system, we put too much emphasis on the individual and not as much on the systemic
Right.
controls. And I think it would be nice, it's probably a rich fantasy of mine, that we look at the larger social structures that affect how much people drink rather than just trying to get each person to change their behavior. Because I think the cost benefit analysis doesn't really work as well there.
I think it's an excellent point, and it's one, the alcohol industry wants people to drink responsibly so that they're not regulated like the tobacco industry or the opioid industry or anything else. And here at US Alcohol Policy Alliance, we're trying to change that. Stephanie Mencimer, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, a really terrific piece in Mother Jones. 7 years later, it's still incredibly pertinent, and we really, really appreciate you sharing your reporting story, but also your personal story. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to The Shift. I'm Mike Marshall, and together we're shifting America's alcohol story. If you found today's conversation useful, please follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and share it with a friend or colleague. For more truth, research, and ways to take action, sign up for our newsletter at alcoholpolicy.org. That's alcoholpolicy.org. And if you believe in this work, consider making a donation to support the U.S. Alcohol Policy Alliance. Until next time, keep moving the conversation forward.